Hi there, you're on Gossip Says channel. Enjoy watching, subscribe and like it. It's growing our community.
Story 1. OP's husband insists they remove her brother from their life be they're pregnant and bro has POCD. Original post. My brother has POCD. Now that I'm pregnant, my husband is forcing me to cut contact with him. My brother is one of the kindest and gentlest people I know. When we were kids, he was always the advice giver and peacemaker. Sometimes I was jealous of him, because even though he was younger than me, he seemed to keep things together effortlessly. That's why my entire family was shocked when he tried to kill himself. We had no idea how much he was suffering, and I still hate myself to this day for not seeing it. Our parents forced him into therapy after that, and he was subsequently diagnosed with OCD. The type of OCD he has is informally known as POCD. To greatly simplify, it's a form of harm OCD involving children. Harm OCD is when a person is terrified that their intrusive thoughts mean they are going to hurt someone. Everyone has intrusive thoughts, but people with OCD believe that their intrusive thoughts make them bad people. People with POCD think that their intrusive thoughts mean they are predators towards children. Over the years, my brother has told multiple therapists about his intrusive thoughts, and they have all agreed he is not a predator. I don't think they would risk their licenses by saying he wasn't a predator, if there was even a small risk that he was. They're mandated reporters, for God's sake. It's not like I'm planning on leaving my brother alone with our baby. He wouldn't even agree to that. Real predators don't avoid children, and they certainly don't agonize in fear that they may hurt a child. I've tried telling my husband everything I've written here, but he won't budge. He says that if there's any chance those therapists were wrong, then we can't risk our baby around my brother. He is threatening to leave me if I keep my brother in my life. I understand why my husband is doing this. He was a victim of a predator when he was a child, and I know he's just trying to protect our baby. Which is why I'm going to give in. I can't lose the love of my life when I know he's just trying to be a good dad. I convinced him I needed to wait until after New Year's to do it. I'm terrified of what this is going to do to my brother. He's going to ask why I suddenly stopped talking to him, and if I tell him, it might just push him over the edge. If my brother hurt himself over this, I could never forgive myself. Not to mention that my parents and sisters are going to ask why we suddenly stopped going to family functions. They're going to hate my husband if I tell them the truth. My life is about to explode, and I can't even tell the people close to me about it. I can't tell my parents and sisters about this for obvious reasons. If I try to tell my friends about this, they might think my brother is an actual predator. A part of me wishes I never told my husband about my brother's OCD. Before I got pregnant, I confided in him that I was worried about my brother's future happiness. My brother had told me he wanted to get married and have kids, but he didn't think he would be able to. My husband asked me why my brother felt that way. I didn't want to lie to him, so I stupidly told him the truth. I'm sorry that this post is a rambling mess. I just can't hold it all in anymore. OP had posted to our /legal advice asking if her brother's diagnosis could be used against her in a custody battle. That post was removed by mods and could not be recovered, but here are a few comments from the LA post and the TOMC post. There's no need to cut off your brother due to POCD. They really need to change the name of that condition. The people who have it aren't pedophiles, they live with crippling and unfounded fear that they are pedophiles and typically avoid kids as a result. Custody defaults to 50-50. Your husband would have to prove that your brother provides a clear danger to your child, which a POCD diagnosis does not mean. He could raise the claim, but you could easily refute it. There is no legal need to cut off your brother, and refusing to do so would not affect custody. Your brother is not a pedophile. He suffers from compulsive fear of pedophilia. On a non-legal note, I think you should tell your husband that unless he seeks therapy, you will not allow him around your child unsupervised. This kind of unprocessed trauma around child sexual abuse can lead to very bad parenting decisions that will seriously affect your child. Here is an article. I am currently studying to be a clinical psychologist and thought I would go into more detail about what POCD is for those who don't know. I'm going to explain this as simply as possible. POCD is a type of OCD in which an individual is afraid of becoming a pedophile and often has intrusive thoughts about it. This does not mean that a person is actually attracted to children, They just have a terrible fear about becoming attracted to children or harming a child. Here is a wonderful article to review for more examples and information. Also a psychologist, and also someone who has OCD, this is 100% accurate. OCD intrusive thoughts are egodystonic, meaning that these thoughts are against what an OCD sufferer truly believes in. There's a saying that OCD attacks what you value, or hate, most, and it's so very true. It's almost a certainty that a person with POCD is so repulsed and disgusted by pedophilia that, metaphorically, the OCD latches onto this, knowing exactly where to hit to cause the most suffering, and in contrast, someone who is an actual pedophile does not worry about harming children. In fact, I'd argue that people with POCD, just like OP's brother, are quite literally the safest people to be around your baby, as the thought of ever harming a child causes them relentless and clinically severe agony. I truly think that OCD is one of the most commonly misunderstood disorders. Posts like this really speak to that. So, if anyone wants to learn more about POCD, or the other types of pure OCD, I really recommend this video. First update. Note, OP also added this update into her original post, so it is in both places. The comments on my last post were a wake-up call for me. They made me realize what my husband's behavior looks like from an outsider's perspective, and I was disgusted by what I saw. I decided to have a conversation with him about my change of heart. First off, I'm not cutting my brother off. Second, he must talk with a psychologist who understands POCD. If he still doesn't feel comfortable with my brother, we won't go to family events where he is attending. I told him that if he didn't agree to those terms, I would pack his bags for him. My husband had a panic attack after I told him this. He threatened to leave me again and said he would get full custody. This time around, I was prepared.
Please subscribe,
I told him I had
leave
solid
comments,
evidence to
rate
prove my brother
videos,
wasn't a
and click
predator.
the bell not to miss my
Even
videos.
if the judge isn't receptive at first, multiple psychologists explaining POCD would sway them. I also reminded him I have complete control over his involvement in my pregnancy. There's nothing stopping me from moving out of state to my parents. He stormed out after that. I was worried sick, because he didn't come back until the following morning. We had an argument about him not answering his phone, but when we both calmed down, he begrudgingly agreed to my terms. My husband isn't the type of man to break his word, but this whole fiasco has shown me I have to be prepared. I've scheduled a consultation with a family attorney. I want to believe that my husband wouldn't go down that path. I want to trust him, but I can't live my life with the threat of losing my child hanging over my head. He's not a bad man, and I know all of his demands have pure intentions behind it. That being said, I can't allow him to use his trauma as an excuse to become a cruel, controlling person. The other night, I asked him if he had ever gone to therapy about what happened to him. He said no, because talking about it made him feel like he was reliving it. I think therapy would do him good, but I have to respect that he knows what is best for himself. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm no longer scared to face it. Thank you to everyone who commented. I was doubting myself, but seeing the testimonies of so many people with OCD helped me regain my confidence. Second update, December 27th. I have been married to my husband for 4 years. My brother has an anxiety disorder called POCD. It's a form of harm OCD, which is an anxiety disorder. My brother isn't a predator. He has an unfounded and irrational fear of being one. People with POCD are no more likely to offend than people without this condition. I have tried explaining this to my husband multiple times. He refused to listen and threatened to leave me unless I cut contact with my brother. I gave him an ultimatum in return. I told him we won't go to my family functions after our baby is born, as long as he talks to a psychologist who understands POCD. He agreed, but it's clear to me now that he didn't mean it. We went to my parents' house for Christmas dinner. My husband seemed upset, but I thought it was because of traveling all weekend. Dinner was going well until my husband asked my uncle why he brought his kids with him. My uncle was confused and asked my husband what he meant by that. My husband then said that he wouldn't allow his children in the same room as a child predator. He used a more graphic term, but I'm not willing to type it. Everything was chaotic after that. My uncle kept asking who the predator was, while my parents and sisters were yelling at my husband. My husband yelled at them back. My brother left the table, and I followed him to his car. He asked me why my husband thought he was a predator. I admitted to telling my husband about his POCD. My brother yelled at me for telling. He said I might have ruined his life. I apologized and tried to explain why I did it. He left without hearing me out. All my worst fears have come true. My parents and my sisters hate my husband, while my husband hates them back. My brother won't talk to me. My mother is trying to explain my brother's condition to my uncle, but we don't know if he'll come around on this. If he doesn't, I might have ruined my brother's life. My husband got everything he wanted, and I'm starting to hate him for it. He isn't even sorry. I can't stand to even look at him right now, and I told him he is banned from any appointments with my OBGYN. I also told him he won't be in the room when I give birth. He thinks I'm punishing him for the sake of a predator. It feels like leaving is my only option. My parents and sisters want me to. Even I want to at this point, but I don't have the heart to. My husband isn't a bad man. I know he is reacting this way because of his past trauma. I don't know how to help him, because he won't go to a therapist to address it. How can I fix all this? TLDR, my husband doesn't understand my brother's mental illness. He ruined Christmas, and now my family hates him. I'm starting to hate him too. Story 2: can't get over husband's emotional affair. My husband, now 39M, and I, now 37F, have been together 12 years, and married for 8 of those years. About 5 years ago, he had a situation with another woman. I have a hard time understanding why and what was going on, and he's unable to provide clarity. First thing, he is bipolar 2 rapid cycling with psychosis. At the time this happened, we had just learned he was hallucinating and had been for a long time. So, we were still working his doc on the meds. After this issue was discovered, they completely altered his meds. We found another psychologist, and my husband has been the most stable we've seen in a very long time. I had a good friend, we'll call her JM. She was a great person. My husband and I have 2 kids, and she didn't want any. She loved kids though, and would often exchange Christmas presents with my kids for birthdays and holidays. I met her through my job, and thought she would make a great project manager. However, the office we worked for had a lot of Nepo babies that worked there, and she was often overlooked. It wasn't just me, everyone in my office agreed she deserved better. My husband, also in the tech field, needed to build a team in this new department he would be managing. I suggested he hire her as a project manager. Though she didn't have the title, he hired her as much of work experience qualified her, and we knew her as quick study. I remember my husband letting me know they were hiring her, and he asked me how we should handle this since she is my friend. I told him, don't discuss anything personal and didn't hang out outside of work, we will be fine. An entire year goes by, and my husband is just not in a good place. He's unhappy and almost resentful. He expresses his want/need to go out with people after work to drink and go to shows. The people he was supposedly discussing this with were all in the mid-20s and were single. He would often point out that JM would go too. He would often get work and get messages from his employees, so frequent cell phone use never made me bat an eye. I would occasionally meet up with JM for girls' nights and catch up. She would mention things my husband and I discussed and tell me stories about how my husband was at work. I never thought anything because I figured as colleagues they would discuss certain things. However, the more it happened, the more personal and detailed it was. It made me pause. He told her about his mental health struggles, and his mom didn't even know about them at this point. One evening we went to dinner and he told me how he took an early lunch so they could explore some shops near their office and how he checked out the gym. Up until then, he had assured me several times that he didn't speak to JM unless it was work-related. I told him immediately that this made me upset and left dinner early. On the way home he was upset with me and couldn't figure out how he was wrong. I told him we had very easy stipulations: don't discuss personal matters and don't hang out outside of work. He insisted this was all they ever did that. I knew better. Someone who has a strict OCD schedule doesn't just suddenly take an early lunch with someone they hardly speak to. Our disagreement continued, and I demanded access to his bank statements and phone. Turns out they pretty much IM'd each other all day long. She talked about how she doesn't know how he could have kids and how she would never. She would talk to him about everything but in a completely different light than how she did with me. He agreed kids were hard and would talk about everything with her. Even would poke fun at how dorky I am a dork, but he'd always liked that about me. Now he's making fun of it. I didn't find any nudes, but she would send me lots of links to clothes she would shop for to wear to different things. One of which was her telling him she was sick and can't make the work Halloween party. She sent a picture of a sexy astronaut costume she said she would have worn, was not appropriate for work, and my husband said, "I wish you could come." I discovered that he went to lunch with her and some others almost every day, and they'd leave and come back together. When he was texting at night, 90% of the time it was her about personal unwork-related stuff that he was so responsive to. And the gym? He was trying to get her to go with him. The last text was her telling him on a Sunday about a new haircut and how soft it was. My husband replied, "Can't wait to see it." There's other stuff that is more related to how he was at home with me. It wasn't great, and he was like a walking zombie at best. Once we worked with therapists and his doctors, they immediately updated the meds he was on, and he says a lot of what he was doing at the time was autonomous and a big blur. He said he remembers talking to her, but didn't realize it was that frequent and never once compared her to me. He said he liked her as a friend and didn't put together that all her attention on him was flirting. I confronted her and told her I thought my husband had a crush on her. She said he'd wanted to go to the gym, but didn't notice. She told me she'd stopped talking to him. She immediately contacted him through a different app to ask if he was okay. It bothered me that I don't know what I don't know. He did lie a lot and make it sound like he never talked to her. I wonder if he is still lying about it. It hurts that he would lie and manipulate me, and it hurts he never stopped her. There is another side that thinks I'm being overdramatic. It's so confusing.
Please subscribe, leave comments, rate videos, and click the bell not to miss my videos.